I've stopped assuming silence means everything is fine. The front gate wasn't locked. I pushed it open with my shoulder, balancing the cake carrier against my hip. There were too many cars in the driveway for a quiet Sunday. Uncle Tom's Ford, Aunt Clara's silver Lexus, something sleek and black, I didn't recognize. I paused on the porch cake in both hands, trying not to read too much into it. The door opened before I knocked. Sophia stood there, lip gloss intact, holding a half-empty champagne flute. Her eyes flicked down to the box I was carrying. "Oh, you're here." "A beat. They thought you had tutoring today. So did I, until the school cancelled last minute because the HVAC failed again. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't thought I needed to." I followed her in without comment. The house smelled like rosemary and wine. Laughter spilled in from the patio, familiar voices tightly wound. I moved quietly through the kitchen, where dishes were already stacked in the sink, and someone had arranged the hors d'oeuvres in a neat, looping pattern on a marble tray. I found a space on the far edge of the counter, next to a towering 3-tier cake covered in sculpted roses and gold-dusted fruit. I set mine down beside it, 8-inch chocolate homemade. I had wrapped a thin ribbon around the base. There was a dent on one side where the foil had folded during the drive. No one noticed me come in. Or, if they did, they didn't say anything. I opened the fridge to store the extra frosting. Half the shelves were already claimed by sparkling water, imported cheeses, and a tub labeled Sophia's salad do not touch. I closed it again slower than necessary. Trevor brushed past me a few minutes later, laughing, a bottle in each hand. "Didn't think you'd make it," he said, not stopping. "I had the afternoon free. Nice of you to drop by. Drop by." The words caught, somewhere in the space between my stomach and my spine. Sophia returned to the kitchen now, with a camera in hand. "Can you move the chocolate one over a bit?" She didn't look at me. "It's kind of crowding the display." I moved it an inch, then another. Marilyn entered then in a cream blouse and gold clip-on earrings, face flushed from wine and patio heat. She looked straight through me, then glanced down at the cake. "What's that?" she asked. "It's for you." "Oh, well, next time let us know first. I didn't plan on extra dessert." I nodded. A reflex. Behind Robert stood at the sliding glass door, deep in conversation with someone from the country club. His voice had that half-laughing tone he used when telling people about Trevor's promotion. I turned to leave, but Marilyn was already moving past me, calling someone else's name. No one asked why I had come. No one asked how I knew. No one noticed I'd parked halfway down the block to leave the driveway clear. In the hallway, I paused beside the sideboard. A family photo from last Christmas had been updated. Trevor and Sophia, in the center, Robert's arm around Sophia Marilyn mid-laugh. I wasn't in it. I hadn't been there that day. Work had run late and they said they'd retake it later. The small frame I'd given them last year, a picture of my students holding signs that spelled out, "Thank you, Ms. Whitmore," was gone. At the door, Sophia's voice followed lightly. "We really didn't think you'd come today." I didn't respond. I reached for the handle. Melissa Marilyn's voice this time, sharp and practiced. I turned halfway, fingers still on the knob. "Next time, just let us know if you're planning to stop by. It's a bit chaotic today." There was a smear of raspberry filling on her cuff. Her lipstick had faded at the corners. I said nothing, just nodded again, and stepped out. The sun had shifted. The gift bag I'd brought with the card slid sideways in the passenger seat as I backed out slowly, watching the house shrink in the rear view. In the mirror, someone stepped into the front doorway, just a silhouette, but turned away before I could tell who it was. At the stop sign, I pulled over. The frosting container still sat on the passenger seat beside me. I ran my thumb across the lid, then unscrewed it and dipped a fingertip in. Too much cocoa, not enough butter. I hadn't had time to test the batch before baking. The quiet in the car pressed against my ears. I rested my head against the steering wheel, not because I needed to cry, there were no tears, but because the silence now felt like a verdict. Somewhere behind me, their laughter continued, insulated by wine and patio heat. Oregon State hadn't been my first choice. There was an art school up north that offered a partial scholarship after I submitted a charcoal series of people waiting in parking lots, backs bent, hands in pockets, faces turned toward nothing. I never replied to the offer. I folded the letter twice, then again, and tucked it inside a desk drawer beneath a broken stapler and a single glove. "It's good to be practical," my father said when I mentioned switching to education. "No one needs another starving artist." I hadn't argued. I smiled, printed the new course schedule, and told myself practicality was its own kind of devotion. That fall, I came home every weekend. I told people it was to save on laundry, but really it was to keep things even: dinners, Sunday errands, the occasional Costco run. I once skipped a friend's birthday just to help my mother alphabetize the spice rack. She liked the coriander near the front, where she could see it. "You don't have to come so often," she said once, lining up the glass jars. "It's not like we need anything." At the next family dinner, Trevor had flown in from New York for the holidays. He wore a new coat and spoke about a pending partnership. He gestured with one hand, the other still clutching a half-full glass. "They're bringing me into the equity circle next quarter. The contract's not final, but it's close." Someone clapped him on the back. Marilyn leaned in like she was hearing about royalty. I mentioned a student who had read a full chapter out loud for the first time. "That's sweet," someone said. "Anyway, Trevor, tell us about your new office. They never told me to be quiet. They just moved on. When I started earning my own paycheck, I bought my father a watch. It wasn't expensive, but it was simple and clean, the kind with a leather band and silver dial. I handed it to him in a small navy box. He turned it over once. "You really ought to be saving." I nodded, as if I hadn't just watched a month's worth of budgeting disappear in one moment of goodwill. That was the year I cross-stitched a handkerchief for my mother's birthday. It took 4 evenings to finish sitting on the worn couch in my apartment while the radiator hummed beside me. I chose small roses and stitched her initials in the corner. She opened the package, lifted the cloth with her fingertips, and smiled. "Oh, Melissa, you know I haven't used one of these in decades." She folded it neatly and placed it back in the box. It ended up in the drawer beneath the wine corkscrew and some old batteries. The next morning, a thank you card sat on the counter addressed to the Whitmores. No name, no note inside. Trevor's gifts never stayed in drawers. His espresso machine, held court on their counter for years. The trip to Aspen he booked for their anniversary still filled half the photo albums. Even the carry-on suitcase he gave Marilyn for your Paris dreams, he'd said, lived by the front door like a promise. I brought home stories instead. Little ones' quiet victories. A student who spelled because correctly, without pausing. A shy girl who raised her hand for the first time. "That's nice," Robert would murmur between bites of roast. "Pass the bread, will you?" Eventually, I stopped bringing up the classroom, not out of spite, just to conserve the breath. Still, I tried. I wore the sweater Marilyn complimented once, even though the sleeves pulled at my elbows. I downloaded the investment app Robert suggested, even though I never understood the charts. I sent texts on their anniversary, their birthdays, A quiet congratulations when Trevor's company made national news. When I forwarded them the article with his photo, I didn't mention the byline. I had written it for a local paper, just a small profile piece to celebrate alumni. His face made the front page of the Sunday section. My name was at the bottom. Thanks for sharing, Marilyn replied. No emoji. No comment on the writing. I printed the page and slipped it into a folder marked miscellaneous. It's still there between the watercolor postcards I once tried to sell and a letter from a student's parent that simply read, "You changed my son's life. There's a drawer in my apartment that holds the untouched things, the handkerchief, the receipt for the watch, a birthday card I never sent because I couldn't think of anything worth writing. I don't hate the drawer. I just don't open it often. There are people who shout when they feel small. I made casseroles arrived early, remembered birthdays. Trevor brought champagne, I brought home leftovers. And for a long time I believed the distance was because I hadn't yet tried hard enough. Some absences echo longer than the things we remember. There's a red notebook I keep in the bottom drawer of my classroom desk. The cover is soft, the edges slightly frayed. It's the one I used in 10th grade, mostly for doodling when assignments finished early. On the second to last page, I had drawn a family standing in front of a trophy case. The father's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, the mother angled toward him, face upturned. A third figure stood to the side, smaller arms behind her back, eyes not drawn in. I never showed it to anyone, but I never threw it away either. The day I won the state-level watercolor contest, there was no one in the auditorium. The announcement had echoed in a room full of strangers, polite claps, a folded certificate. The ride home was quiet. My backpack thumped softly in the passenger seat. The house was dark when I arrived, save for a porch light and a note on the fridge. Trevor presents today at 1 Robotics Showcase. Don't wait up. The next day, Marilyn looked up from folding towels. You didn't miss much, she said. Science competitions are always so much more dynamic than art things. I hadn't told her about the ribbon. There's a photograph in the front hallway of their house Christmas a few years ago. Everyone wore navy or cream. The photographer had used a wide-angle lens, and somehow I ended up off to the far left, 1 foot half cropped. My hand was blurred. I think I had just adjusted my sweater. That's the best one, Robert said when the proofs came back. Everyone looks put together. My name didn't make it into the family holiday card that year. The envelope said the Whitmores, and the interior message was pre-printed in gold script. There was a line for signatures, but it was left blank. I'd sat beside that card on the mantel for weeks, without noticing it was missing anything until Jasmine pointed it out. Why isn't your name here? They probably forgot. I'd said, which sounded kinder than they probably didn't think to include it. The day I got the email about the Teacher of the Year nomination, I printed it on thick paper, the kind used for resumes. I slid it into a sheet protector and left it propped on my kitchen counter for a while. I think I hoped someone might see it. That Sunday over lunch, I mentioned it casually just after the second round of salad. Marilyn poured iced tea with one hand. That's nice. But honestly, teaching elementary school isn't about awards, is it? Robert added without looking up. Good teachers don't need recognition. The pitcher had left a wet ring on the tablecloth. I folded a napkin under it. Trevor looked up briefly. You always did like kids, he said. I never had that patience. The conversation turned to mortgage rates. No one asked where the ceremony would be. That night, I moved the certificate into the drawer next to the warranty for the washing machine. In the corner of my desk at school sits a ceramic vase. It leans slightly left-chipped near the rim, where one of the kids knocked it over during a rainy day indoor recess. I never replaced it. I just turned the crack toward the wall and kept using it. Lily had given it to me the year she finally learned to write in cursive. She'd handed it over wrapped in pink tissue, a tag attached with ribbon. The note read, "You make school feel like I can breathe." Her spelling wasn't perfect. I never corrected it. The vase still holds 3 fake sunflowers and a pencil with no eraser. A few months ago, Robert cleaned out the attic and texted to ask if I wanted my old school notebooks. I said yes. They arrived in a box labeled Miscellaneous Melissa's Stuff. Inside was the watercolor portfolio I thought had been thrown away. The edges were bent. A few pages had stuck together from moisture. One sketch showed a chair with no one sitting in it. The shading was uneven. I had scribbled a line beneath it, reserved, but no one asked for whom. There was also a birthday card from my 12th year, unsigned, the envelope unsealed. I never brought it up. During a visit last fall, Marilyn asked Trevor if he could speak at her women's circle about leadership, entrepreneurship, something impressive. "You've built so much," she said. "They'd love to hear how you got there." Robert added, "It's good for young people to see what's possible." When I reached for a second biscuit, Marilyn touched my wrist lightly. "Careful, dear. That dress looks like it fits just right." Trevor handed me the butter dish without looking up. My fingers left an oily smudge on my plate. Later that night, I peeled the price tag off a notebook I'd bought earlier that week, the kind with thick linen pages and a stitched spine. I opened to the first page, but didn't write anything. Some things don't need to be remembered to stay with you. Some fractures don't happen suddenly, they've just been there, waiting for you to see where the crack begins. I didn't plan to stay long. I had the RSVP envelope folded neatly with the itinerary, Sophia's list of events, and a printed note reminding everyone to submit their meal preferences by Friday. I also brought a small box of rosemary shortbread, tied with grey string. It wasn't a big gesture, just something quiet, something meant to say I was trying. The front steps hadn't been swept in a while. I brushed past a fallen maple leaf stuck to the doormat. The key under the flower pot was still there, slightly rusted at the tip. I turned it slowly, not wanting the latch to echo. No one was in the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of lemons and floor polish. Somewhere down the hall, voices murmured. I assumed they were in the study. I almost placed the envelope on the table and left. Almost. I hadn't meant to stand near the doorway. I hadn't meant to hear anything. "She's been dancing around the issue," Robert said. "Dress costs airfare, hair makeup always mentioning it, never asking outright. It's like she wants us to feel bad without saying the words." "She'll pay," Marilyn answered, as if the matter had already been decided. "And it'll be good for her. She's always been too dependent. This is her chance to grow up." Trevor's voice broke in lower, more cautious. "I told her I'd cover the costs. She said no, but I think it was pride, not practicality." "Then let her have her pride," Robert replied. "We made our choices. She made hers. If she picked a low-income path, that's her responsibility." "I just think—" Trevor paused. "She's doing the best she can." Robert cut him off. "You don't reward mediocrity, son. We helped you because you had potential. You were worth investing in." I didn't move. My feet felt locked to the floor. Melissa Marilyn added was emotional from the start. All that drawing and writing, none of it led anywhere. She teaches third-grade Trevor. "It's nice, but it's not a career with upward mobility. You make it sound like she failed. She chose something small. That's not failure. It's just limited." There was a rustle of paper, maybe a seating chart or menu. I pictured the 3 of them standing around the desk holding glasses, discussing my worth in the tone usually reserved for weather patterns or property values. "I think she's trying." Trevor said again, softer this time. That's fine, Robert responded. But she's not going to drag down this wedding with her financial guilt. If she can't afford to participate, she can step back, quietly. Marilyn's voice this time with finality. We've already committed $50,000 to this. Trevor and Sophia deserve a wedding that reflects who they are, not who she isn't. A breath caught in my chest before I knew I'd been holding it. My hand slipped. The RSVP envelope fell to the floor just outside the study. No one noticed. The hallway rug had a crease in the middle, something I used to trip on when I was little. I remembered crawling under that desk once hiding from a thunderstorm while Robert filled out loan applications. He didn't see me that time either. I turned toward the living room. My eyes landed on the ceramic vase I'd given Marilyn last spring. It held plastic tulips now. The original bouquet had wilted weeks ago. The base of the vase was cracked, and someone had turned it so the floor faced the wall. The box of cookies still sat in my bag. I didn't unpack it. Back in the kitchen, the table had a new runner blue with embroidered flowers. A wine glass rested near the edge half full, leaving a faint ring. Someone had peeled the label off the bottle and left the shredded pieces next to the sink. I used to think silence in this house meant comfort. But silence can mean many things. Silence can be a strategy. I reached for the front door. As I turned the knob, I caught sight of a list taped to the side of the fridge. Guest arrival logistics. My name wasn't on it. Ryan's wasn't either, but the Aldridges had been assigned welcome baskets room upgrades, handwritten notes in custom envelopes. I stepped outside, careful not to let the door slam. In the car, I sat with the seatbelt unbuckled. The box of cookies rested in my lap. One had broken during the drive and crumbs clung to the edges of the wax paper. I didn't start the engine right away. My phone buzzed. A message from Trevor. Hey, are you free to talk sometime this week? I'd like to clear up a few things. I stared at the screen, then turned it face down. No one had called out when I left. No footsteps, no apology. I didn't need to wait for someone to open the door. I'd heard everything I needed through the crack they left behind. I used to think silence was what happened when people ran out of things to say. Now I know better. Silence is its own sentence, complete, deliberate, final. The envelope was white, unsealed, with the bank card tucked neatly inside. I didn't add a letter, just one line on a post-it note. Thank you. I don't need it anymore. I slipped it into the mailbox outside their gate, where the ivy had started to overgrow the numbers. My name had been embossed on that card since college. It had always felt borrowed, like the money came with an invisible ledger of expectation. The email to Trevor was shorter than I expected it would be. I won't be attending the wedding. I hope it's beautiful. I need space right now. No explanation, no defense, no circle drawn around my decision, asking to be understood. He responded within the hour, a long message I didn't open. I let the notification stay unread until my phone cleared it on its own. Later, Marilyn called twice, then once more after dinner. I let it ring out each time. On the third call, she left a voicemail. You're making things unnecessarily difficult. Trevor's trying to be generous. Don't ruin it by being dramatic. I didn't save the message. The family photo had been sitting on the second shelf of my bookcase, framed in silver. Christmas 2 years ago. Everyone dressed in forest green and navy. I had been placed at the far edge, half turned. My hand rested behind my back, awkward. My hair was pulled too tight. The smile didn't match my eyes. I didn't break the frame. I didn't throw it out. I wrapped it in an old tea towel and slid it into the back of the linen drawer. Next to it, I folded the pressed napkins I'd embroidered for Mother's Day. They hadn't been used. On the fridge, where that photo had once been clipped with a magnet shaped like an apple, I placed something else, a laminated poem on pale blue cardstock. A third-grade student named Angel had written it last year. Miss Whitmore is kind like soup when it's cold. She helps us be brave even when we don't feel bold. She doesn't get loud. She listens real deep, and her words stay in my head even when I sleep. The magnet didn't quite hold the bottom corners flat. They curled slightly like the page was breathing. I left my phone in a drawer for 2 days. When I finally turned it back on, there were more messages. A group text with updates about the wedding menu. A note from Aunt Diane. Is everything okay? Your mom said you've been sensitive lately. Another from my cousin Ryan. You good. Heard you're skipping the big day. Respect if that's what you need. I didn't reply. In the kitchen drawer, I found the letter opener Robert had given me on my 30th birthday. Brass handle engraved with my initials. He said every professional woman needed tools that lasted. I kept it because it was sharp. I used it to slice open the RSVP envelope that had fallen near their study. It was creased now from being stepped on. Inside, the invitation was still pristine, embossed gold lettering, heavy stock navy border. I turned it over once, then twice, then slid it back in and taped it shut again. No return address, no note inside. I placed it in the recycling bin without ceremony. A card arrived from Sophia the next morning. We're sorry you're feeling overwhelmed. Just know you're always welcome if you change your mind. Family is family. Underneath her handwriting, a printed quote, a sister is both your mirror and your opposite. I folded the card in half, slowly at the seam. Not torn, just bent. I pulled the wool throw from the couch navy with white stitching. It had been a birthday gift from Marilyn years ago. Still warm, still intact. I wrapped it around my shoulders, not for comfort, but as a reminder. Some things keep working, even when the sentiment has faded. I deleted the wedding calendar entry from my phone. It asked if I wanted to remove all reminders. I pressed yes. On Sunday, I cleared the top of my desk, piled up the old documents, lesson plans, and PTA flyers. At the bottom was a thank you note from a parent I barely remembered. I don't know what you said to Olivia that day, but she came home standing taller. Thank you for giving her back her voice. I tucked it behind the poem on the fridge. My voice isn't loud. It never has been. But stepping away isn't the same as stepping down. Some exits don't need explanation. They speak for themselves in the stillness that follows. I didn't expect silence to have weight, but it does. It settles into corners. It presses gently against the walls. It hums at the edge of everything. The new apartment has ceilings I can touch without tiptoeing. The linoleum floor curls at one corner. When I step across it in the morning, it sticks slightly, like a reminder that this place is lived in, not just rented. I bought a second-hand electric kettle from a church thrift store. It takes nearly 6 minutes to boil. That feels fair. The sun reaches through the blinds around 8. It falls across the table. I assembled myself crooked at one leg, but balanced by an old biology textbook I've never read. I don't move the book. The table doesn't wobble anymore. I taped a note to the refrigerator. A student had written it on the back of a quiz once. In slanted pencil, it says, "You make things make sense, even when they're not supposed to." It's next to the tiny cactus Jasmine brought over in a paper bag. It doesn't need much, she told me, brushing soil off her jeans. Just a little light, a little space. I didn't ask her to bring anything, but she came anyway. one arm holding the cactus, the other wrapped around a faded blue armchair. "It's ugly," she shrugged, "but it's comfortable. Like a decent apology. The fabric is fraying on one side. There's a coffee ring stain on the armrest that won't come out no matter how I scrub. I stopped trying. I keep a small journal now. Nothing poetic. Just words I don't say out loud. On the first page I wrote, 'I don't owe anyone a version of me they prefer.' I underlined it once softly. The pen bled through a little. There's no television here. The radio sometimes picks up classical music when the weather shifts. I don't change the station. I let it play even when it crackles." Trevor texted twice. "Just checking in. Hope you're good." Then 3 days later, "Everyone misses you." The phone stayed on silent. I read the words. I didn't reply. The Whitmores send newsletters every December, photocopied collages of smiling faces and vacation snapshots. This year's envelope arrived last week. I left it unopened on the counter until the ink from the return address smudged in a patch of spilled tea. I finally dropped it in the trash, whole unread light. No one asked for the spare house key back. I mailed it anyway. A plain envelope. No note. Just the key taped inside. It felt like removing a splinter that had been there too long. I teach on Wednesdays and Saturdays now. Just a few kid students who've fallen behind or fallen silent. We meet at the library. I don't wear makeup. I bring my own markers. One boy asked if I was someone's mom. I smiled and said, "I'm just someone who listens. There's a laundromat 3 blocks down. The dryer's only half work. I've learned to dry my shirts on hangers by the window. They smell faintly of detergent and morning dust. A woman named Lena folds her towels in the corner booth and always offers me the plastic clip for free. You've got kind hands," she once said, not looking up. Sometimes I walk without a destination, not to escape, just to move forward without explanation. I pass a row of townhomes with purple doors. One has a mailbox covered in stickers that say, "Protect your peace and not everything deserves your energy." I slowed once to read them all. I didn't need to take a photo. The fridge hums at night, steady and low. It reminds me of my grandmother's old sewing machine, the rhythm of thread through cotton, the pause before the final stitch. I used to sit under her table while she worked, tracing patterns with my fingers in the wood grain. She never told me to stop. I haven't unpacked everything. Some boxes remain sealed. I'm not avoiding them. I just don't need what's inside. A photo frame, a set of dishes with someone else's initials, a scarf I wore when I still thought dressing nicely could earn approval. I moved the family portrait to the back of the closet. I didn't tear it. I didn't burn it. I folded the corners inward and slid it into an old envelope marked "Receipts." The photo bends slightly now. It doesn't lay flat anymore. There's a small grocery store a block away. The woman at checkout remembers my name. Once she asked, "Is someone helping you carry these?" I shook my head and said, "I've got it." She didn't offer again. The cactus has started to tilt slightly. I rotated it toward the sun. The soil cracked down the middle, but the stem held firm. I didn't water it. Not yet. I don't count the days. I measure time in other ways, the way my shoulders no longer tense before I speak, the way I sit through breakfast without bracing for correction, the way the space around me doesn't ask for permission to exist. I didn't leave to be brave. I left because staying would have required disappearing. I chose presence, not noise, a room of my own, even if the light flickers. And when the tea cools too fast, I don't rush to reheat it. I drink it anyway, quiet, bitter mine. I used to believe distance might create understanding. That maybe with enough space, people start to see clearly. But what returned wasn't recognition, it was need dressed as routine. Can you resend your RSVP? The message blinked on my screen during lunch duty. Trevor needs a final count for the caterer. No greeting. No mention of the silence between us. No acknowledgement of absence, just a missing checkbox they wanted filled. I marked the message unread and set my phone face down. 3 hours later, another notification. Voicemail this time. Melissa Roberts' voice was clipped, formal. Family matters don't belong on display. You're too old for tantrums. Let's not make this theatrical. The message ended with a long pause, as if waiting for my apology to rise out of the static. I deleted it without replaying. Sophia's email arrived, next subject. Final bridesmaid payment reminder, the tone was chirpy. If you haven't settled your portion for the dress, please do so by Friday. The shop needs confirmations. Thanks. No line break. No direct name. Just a group message tossed like confetti. Attached was an invoice with all names listed. Mine sat beside a bold red outstanding. They hadn't asked if I was still involved. They hadn't removed me. They'd just left the cell open like a door they didn't plan to knock on, just walk through. At school, the secretary buzzed me to the office. Delivery, she smiled, holding a bouquet. Pale peonies and hydrangeas wrapped tight in ribbon. No note. Just a single envelope tucked underneath. Inside the original invitation and a new RSVP card, untouched. This from someone special? The secretary asked. I smiled. Depends on the definition. I placed the envelope in my desk drawer, right beside a cracked stapler and a student's keychain gift plastic letters spelling, Miss M is cool. That night, Trevor messaged everyone saying you're making this harder than it needs to be. Can we talk somewhere quiet? No mention of what I heard. No admission of what had been said. Just the discomfort of others sent to me like a package I had to unwrap and solve. I didn't respond. Instead, I reached for the mug on my nightstand. White ceramic handle chipped the word steady, fading from the glaze. A student had given it to me last year after I stayed late during parent conferences. You didn't yell when my mom forgot me, he'd whispered. The mug still held warmth from earlier. I cradled it like something worth remembering. 2 days later, another email. This time from the wedding planner. Subject, updated expense breakdown. My name sat on the same row. Same total, same pending amount. Nothing adjusted, nothing removed. They weren't reaching out to include me. They were slotting me in for balance. At recess, Jasmine leaned on the doorframe. You've been quiet lately. That good or bad? I shrugged. They sent flowers. No name. She raised an eyebrow. What kind peonies? Pink. That's a guilty bouquet. I nodded but didn't add more. Later, she left a note in my mailbox. 4 words scribbled on a sticky tab. Don't shrink for peace. It stayed tucked inside my planner. Another message from Trevor followed. You've always been the calm one. Don't let this turn you bitter. There was a photo attached, he and Sophia in matching linen smiling in front of a floral arch. The caption read, Forever starts now. No trace of my name. No mention of mine ever being there. I opened my notebook and wrote, When they come back, listen for their reason, not their words. That night, I peeled a photo from the fridge, an old family vacation shot in Arizona. I placed it gently inside a drawer beside a spare charger and a birthday card from a student that read, I'm glad you're my not mom. The next day, an envelope came in the mail. Handwritten, addressed to me. Inside was a check for half the bridesmaid fee. No signature, No note. The bank slip included a memo line to avoid confusion. I left it on the counter. Uncashed. During a staff meeting, a teacher passed me a flyer for a summer program. Thought of you. It's for educators who want to design their own curriculum. Seems like your thing. I folded it and tucked it between the pages of a book I hadn't finished. A line on the back cover stuck with me. Some stories aren't told, they're lived then left behind. By Friday, the RSVP card still sat unmarked on my desk. No one called to ask if I was okay. They didn't return out of regret. They circled back because the checklist needed completing, the photo needed symmetry, the chairs needed filling. A presence not mine, but the idea of me was still useful. I glanced at the bouquet on the shelf. The outer petals had turned the color of bruised fruit. I didn't toss them. I just let them fade. Some silence no longer feel like absence. They feel like room to breathe. I signed up for the evening writing class on a Wednesday. No announcement, no explanation. Just a folded receipt tucked in my planner next to a grocery list and an old sticker from a student that said, "You're magic." I walked into that community center with a chipped pen and no expectations. I wrote about a crooked fence I saw as a child. The instructor smiled and nodded, then moved on. It was enough. Jasmine stopped by the next morning with coffee and a rolled-up blanket in the passenger seat. "Don't overthink the color," she dropped it near my door. "Just felt like you needed something warm that wasn't polite." I folded it over the arm of my reading chair and didn't match it to anything. At school, the kids were still wild after recess, still losing homework, still putting stickers on my elbow when I wasn't looking, but I heard myself laugh short and unpolished, like it hadn't been used in a while. I kept the worksheet with a misspelled metaphor about a rainbow that yelled hope. It lived on the wall above my desk now, next to a thumbtacked quote. "My peace will not be the collateral for your comfort. I bought a wooden chair at a thrift store 3 blocks down. The legs were uneven, but the back had a slight curve that fit me better than anything upholstered ever had. I spent a weekend sanding and painting it sage green. It sat near the window, angled just right. Sometimes I didn't sit in it. I just looked at it and remembered I could make things better without asking permission. Ryan met me most mornings now. We never planned it. Our walks started at different blocks, but always merged before the bakery. He talked about books his students hated, and I asked whether he ever taught the same story twice. He told me, "Only if I've changed enough to see it new." We never mentioned our families. A text came through on Friday evening. "Trevor wants to see you." Jasmine handed me the phone like it was still hot. I didn't reply right away. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I was measuring what part of me it touched. It didn't reach the center anymore. We met outside a cafe near his apartment. He stood before I reached the table, adjusting his cuffs, like the conversation might stain him. I waited. "You're still mad. I'm not here to prove anything." He ran a hand down the side of his suit jacket. "Look, it's important to Mom that we all appear united. If I go, it's because I choose to." His mouth tightened. "I just wish you'd stop making it so hard." A couple passed behind him laughing. Someone held a balloon. I watched it rise for a moment before tethering back to the child's wrist. "If I come to the wedding, it'll be for you, not for anyone else. And not because I was told to." He opened his mouth. Closed it. "Okay." We didn't hug. I think he expected me to, but I didn't move. I paid for my own coffee. Later that night, I changed the bulb in my desk lamp. It had flickered for weeks, dimming to a tired yellow. I replaced it with one I found at the corner store. It wasn't bright, but it glowed steady. I left it on when I went to bed. The next morning, I rewrote an old journal entry not to change the past, but to read it with new eyes. My pen scratched slower now. The loops were wider. I didn't cross out words as much. The cactus Jasmine gave me had 2 new buds, small and blunt. I hadn't watered it in 5 days, maybe 6. It stayed green anyway. I wore the blue shirt with the fraying collar to class that night. Someone complimented the color. I nodded. No one asked what had changed. No one had to. I no longer needed to be acknowledged to feel real. No longer waited for someone else's permission to be proud of the quiet things, fixing a chair, choosing silence, drinking tea, slowly saying no without folding inward. Trevor's voice didn't echo in my head when I walked home. Neither did my father's. My mother's absence no longer scraped. The space they used to occupy felt repurposed, now furnished with gentler things. I passed a family on the sidewalk, 2 kids eating pretzels, a mother with a tired bun, a father looking at a map. The little girl dropped her snack and didn't cry. She picked it up and offered it to her brother. He took it. Some bonds don't need correction or applause. They just recognize each other. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The smell of old books lingered. I left the hallway light off. The chair by the window was empty. I didn't rush to fill it. Some names echo longer after they're gone. I wrote it in blue ink, careful not to press too hard. The paper was from a stack I bought years ago, slightly rough, faintly yellowed along the edges. I didn't draft or revise. Each sentence landed where it needed to. There were no metaphors, no requests for understanding, just a quiet declaration of edges. If you want contact in the future, it must begin with respect. I'm no longer in orbit. No theatrics, no closure, offered no blame assigned. Only acknowledgement of what had been done and a description of what would not happen again. I folded the letter twice and slipped it into a plain envelope, left it unsealed on the counter for 2 days. The corner curled, and a faint coffee ring from the base of my mug appeared near the flap. I sealed it anyway, not to keep anything in, just to be done. The envelope sat beside the RSVP card I never mailed. The names were still printed in silver foil, Trevor and Sophia centered in a cursive font I didn't recognize. I put both into a manila folder and wrote archive in small neat letters on the tab. I didn't throw them out. I just moved them somewhere quiet. When the email from the wedding planner arrived again, subject final headcount and table assignments, I replied with one line I won't be attending. Please adjust accordingly. No greeting, no signature. That afternoon, I took a detour from the grocery store and drove by my parents' house. I parked across the street, placed the envelope in their mailbox, and left the flag down. No one was outside. The blinds were pulled halfway. I didn't look twice. The next day, a voicemail came from my father. You've made yourself very clear. I hope that brings you something. No, Melissa. No, we received your letter. Just that pause between words, too brief to be emotion, too long to be accidental. I deleted it without saving. At the bank, the teller didn't ask why I was removing Whitmore from the name on my account. She asked for 2 forms of ID, confirmed the spelling, and handed me a small clipboard. When the new card arrived, it said, Melissa Boone. My grandmother's name, the woman who once told me you don't need to raise your voice when your feet are steady. At work, Jasmine looked at the new signature on the attendance sheet and raised her brow. Boone. That fits. I didn't explain. She didn't ask. I pulled an old photo from the back of the drawer, a childhood picture from a camping trip. I was standing next to the picnic table, holding a marshmallow skewer half out of frame. Trevor was centered, smiling, shirt spotless. I placed the photo in a box labeled "Not Now," sealed it with one piece of tape, and slid it into the closet. I replaced it on the fridge with a child's drawing of a tree with blue leaves. The colors were wrong, but the branches reached up like they were trying anyway. I used a new magnet to hold it in place, a small plastic lamp that glowed faintly in the dark. Trevor's last message came on a Wednesday. I wish it could be different. I let it sit. I watched the screen light up, then fade. I didn't open it. I deleted it 3 days later, just after watering the cactus on the windowsill. That weekend, I found an old pair of boots in the back of the closet. The leather was cracked near the ankle, but the soles were still solid. I wore them to the market. A vendor asked if I'd just come from a hike. "No," I said. "I'm just here for apples." In my writing class, the prompt was, "What boundary changed you?" I wrote about a fence my grandmother built herself from discarded wood slats, how each piece was uneven, but she painted them the same soft grey so they'd feel like they belonged. I didn't mention names. I didn't have to. No one clapped. No one commented. That was fine. I visited the DMV the following Thursday. I filled out the form to update my driver's license. The clerk looked at the change from Whitmore to Boone. Divorce, marriage, num. She nodded, stamped the paper, and handed it back. Later that night, I reread an old journal entry where I tried to justify staying silent. I tore out the page. Not from resentment, just routine maintenance. I made room for other truths. The pen I used to write the letter ran dry. I placed it in the drawer next to a matchbook I'd kept from a diner long closed down, a place that never made me feel too much or too little. The chair near the window faced east now. Morning light hit the spine of the book I'd been reading, an anthology of letters never sent. I underlined one line with pencil. "Some doors don't close, you just stop knocking." I closed the book and didn't open it again that week. The silence that followed wasn't loud or echoing. It didn't ask for acknowledgement. It just was. Some mornings feel like they arrived long before I did. Like, the room has already made peace with itself, and I'm just catching up. The kettle clicked off before I could think of a reason to stop it. The same small chip near the spout, the same quiet pop as the lid settled. I didn't rush to pour the water. The mint leaves waited in the ceramic pot, pressed between pages of an old workbook, now unfurling like they remembered the light. I didn't measure anything. It didn't need to be precise to be right. No pings from my phone, no reminders blinking from the calendar app. The only notification was the slow, steady shift of light on the table, warm, indifferent, consistent. I placed the mug on a cloth square I'd embroidered when I was 12. The corners curled. I'd stitched it badly, too tight in some places, skipping rows in others. My mother had once called it a beginner's mess. I kept it anyway. Sometimes imperfect things hold their place longer because no one bothers to take them. On the wall, a child's sketch hung slightly crooked. A small figure holding a book, lines thick with pencil, and the words, "You believed I was smart." I'd never corrected the grammar. The message was already complete. I didn't open the laptop. I already knew what was inside. A student had written me late last night, "I'm in my first semester of education classes. I remember the way you looked at us like we weren't broken." No signature. No emoji. Just truth, left plainly like a glass of water beside the bed. I sat down. The toast on my plate had cooled. I didn't mind. I wasn't eating to fuel anything, I just wanted something ordinary. From the other room, Ryan turned in bed. The old floorboard beneath the dresser creaked once, then stilled. He didn't come out. We didn't need to fill every quiet with explanation. The chair across from me held a blanket, folded 3 times its edges, beginning to fray. I kept meaning to stitch them, but never did. Fraying wasn't failure. It just meant something had been used honestly. The cactus on the windowsill tilted toward the light. I hadn't watered it in a week. Still, it leaned green and unapologetic. Jasmine had given it to me the day I signed my new lease. "You don't have to tend it daily," she'd said. "But it'll surprise you if you do." I believed her. My mug left a faint ring on the wooden table. I traced it absently. The table still smelled faintly of linseed oil from when I sanded it by hand. A spot near the leg was uneven, but I never corrected it. It was mine that way. The invitation to Trevor and Sophia's wedding had arrived in a pale grey envelope. No handwritten note. No hope you can make it. Just a folded card and a website link for meal preferences. I had placed it beside a flyer for a community poetry reading. One went into the bin. The other I pinned near the fridge. No one followed up, not even to pretend. Later, when I changed my name at the bank, the teller tilted her head, slightly. "New chapter." I nodded. She smiled, no further questions. The new card arrived last week, Melissa Boone. No Whitmore, no hyphens. Just letters pressed quietly into plastic. It felt like exhaling. My sweatshirt carried the faded logo of a school trip I only half remembered. The sleeves were thinning, but the fabric near the collar still held the scent of fabric softener. I wore it often, not for comfort, just for truth. The wooden pen sat on my desk, initials carved slightly off-center. I used it each night, writing single lines into a notebook. Not a diary, not therapy, just proof that I was still paying attention. Last night's line, "No one has to validate the roots for the tree to grow." I hadn't written one yet today. I would. The wedding planner had emailed again last week. "Final confirmation of attendance requested, pending Melissa Whitmore." I didn't reply. I had already removed the last name. That should have been answer enough. My mother's voice lived in the back of my head, like background static. "You've always been too sensitive. We can't keep pausing everything for your phases. It's not like you were going to buy a house anyway." Each one folded itself into silence. Not rage, not hurt, just distance. Ryan left an apple slice beside me already cut. He didn't ask anything. He knew better than to narrate quiet. An envelope had arrived under the door last month. No return address. Inside a plain thank you card. "You didn't fix me. You just noticed I was there. That was enough." No name. I kept it taped behind the mirror, not to read, just to remember. I stood and watered the fern in the corner. Jasmine had said it might outgrow its pot if I let it. I hadn't repotted it yet. Still, it spilled freely. I ran my fingers over the stitched cloth beneath the mug. The thread had loosened at the corners, but the initials were still there. Barely readable. Mine. The family group chat remained muted. The last message from my father. "This doesn't have to be dramatic. You've made your point." I hadn't replied. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't making a point. I was just no longer making room where I wasn't welcome. I slipped the wooden pen into its holder, closed the notebook. On its spine, a small embossed line read, "Keep nothing that erases you." I hadn't noticed it when I bought it. Now it felt like a boundary that had always been waiting for me to find. No one knocked. No one texted. No one demanded a version of me that I no longer carried. And still the kettle boiled. And still the cactus turned. And still I was here, folding the blanket again, listening to the house breathe, noticing that nothing cracked when no one clapped. Some mornings aren't meant for celebration. Some are meant for quiet recognition that you are no longer living under someone else's measurement. I picked up the chipped cup, took one slow sip, and wrote nothing, because some peace doesn't need a witness. And I don't need to be called home again, because I never truly left myself